It's really an honor. Thanks also to Majors and Quinn for hosting this event. Becca had to fly all the way from the East Coast to get here, but I grew up just a couple blocks from here and have been coming here since a kid, so this is a real treat to be reading here tonight. And this is my first in-person reading since before the pandemic, so I'm feeling a little rusty and nervous, so bear with me. How I learned to speak. I was born in a sleigh drawn over ice by a fleet of black roosters. My mother did not make a sound. The roosters did not make a sound. The stars did not make a sound. The blades of the sleigh said, shh. So this next poem is a duplex, which is a form invented by the poet Jericho Brown, and he called the duplex a cross between a sonnet, a ghazal, and the blues. And so if you're curious, he has an essay written about the form on the internet, and he also has a lot of them in his book, The Tradition, which Majors and Quinn probably has on their shelves if you want to check it out. We do, or you do. This is a duplex, Song of Songs, a poem beginning with a line from Dickinson. It might be lonelier without the loneliness. At least I say so when I'm feeling lonely. When I'm feeling lonely, what I say is the least wrong of all the wrongs I usually sing. I usually sing the wrong of wrongs. What's your good book? Is it broken? It's God to be a little broken. A milkweed pod cracked open like an eye. The milkweed cracks its clouded eye into empty cathedrals of wind. Into empty cathedrals of wind come seeds. Are they borne aloft on drifts of snow? Beautiful to think so, see so, know. How lonely without this loneliness. So I have a little book called A Book of Surrealist Games, and it's a collection of provocations, which is what the Surrealist poets called it, these little games they would play to kind of activate the unconscious and write poems. So drawing games, some manifestos, and in there is a list of new proverbs they wrote. So I used one of their new proverbs as a provocation. So their proverb was, close your eyes to open them. Close your eyes. John of the Cross takes out his Sharpie and inks a pupil on your lid. Do you know an animal has just enough oil in her brain to tan her own hide? This process is called poetry. Count the flames hovering at the edge of the horizon. Are those planets? Are they skies? John of the Cross is touching your temples. Now he is draping about your shoulders a most magnificent coat. Let's see. So this next poem is a poem about music, or the manipulation of time maybe, which I kind of think manipulating time is really what poetry is. Night music. Crickets congregate in barbershops where time is keenly counted. Dark curl, dark curl, dark snip on the floor. They do not drink from that puddle the moon makes, but fold themselves up like umbrellas, always put away their sewing after prayers. But every evening, the little girl who burns cinnamon sticks in the doorway will sing, bless the city of bells and bridges, bless the 27 bones in the hand, while she sweeps the sidewalk, sweeps under all the doors. Listen, music is segmentable, a chorus, a season, an insect, not like the soundless rivers of your hair. Early explorers sometimes carried watermelons instead of canteens. which is a true fact that I read on the internet. So, actually, if you like Google interesting watermelon facts, like all the web pages say that fact. I don't know where it came from, but we're just gonna go with it. So, early explorers sometimes carried watermelons instead of canteens. Ever cut up a watermelon and smell the way wind is coming towards you across a lake, though you're just standing alone in winter's kitchen? The happy heart is a problem, wrote Jack in a private letter to me on page 87 of a book I found in the library. There are jolts and miracles on every shelf, in every aisle of every orchard, under every sky, like the stars, which are much too beautiful to believe. They will hurt you almost as much as your life, the way you keep wanting to take all the wrong-sized things and make them fit this world. Dear Jack, have you ever hidden a watermelon under your shirt? Ever had faith in something that sounds hollow when ripe? This next poem is a poem about how we build things, like poems or bodies, maybe. I've had a couple friends die of cancer in the last few years, and so I was thinking about how we build things, how we build countries, how we build history. Master plan. Write one good line, then write another good line to stack beneath it. Is how my teacher told me it's best to build a poem. Well, fuck you. I don't care if you have cancer. That's the most ridiculous advice I've ever heard and even copied down in my journal. Like it could ever be so easy to come to terms with the end of a line. My son wanting to get back on the train to ride with all the other men he doesn't know are homeless and have nowhere else to be, while he scored a ticket to Underwater World at the Mall of America with his grandma. What I want to know is, how do they make the glass so thick it can keep the sharks from pouring into Chipotle in the event of a catastrophic storm? Which, if you think about it, isn't so unlikely in this district of cinder blocks on top of prairie on top of bones. Some history holds up a sturdy roof over your head, even though the foundation lies on stolen lands. Welcome to the roads with the soldiers on them. Welcome to the rain with its roads all running to the sea. To the cells and the bodies that are marching out of line, and to the bodies with the wind on them, the wind that choirs each church, the grasses knot and weave. It matters how things get built. It matters how things get built in this world. No. So this next poem is titled, Hope is a Thing with Feathers, which, that's Dickinson's line, right? Okay. I was like, I should Google that. I think there is, and all of a sudden I forgot. Okay. Hope is the thing with feathers. My friend has a tumor in his belly. Cut it out, he said, after I sent him the second card, as if mail was the cancer, and it was all my fault. Everyone was sending him poems about birds. Once a man visited the Natural History Museum regularly over a 3-year period, posing as a wheelchair-bound invalid to smuggle out 10,000 rare eggs. Such desire for beauty is a sickness. Would I hollow out a secret compartment in my bed frame to hoard eggs stolen from the nest of a red-backed shrike? To hold one in my hands, all its gold-spackled fragility born of emptiness, is to know I do anything to conserve my beautiful counterfeit life. Another letter to my dead friend. I've called into work, sick from the work of being alive. I eat all the potato chips I want because no one is here to stop me. No one ever can stop death. So what is there to do but lick salt at the center of the universe? That's what the fawns do. the ones who are yet to be dreamed to the other side, like the seed you once were, my queen, now with jewels of salt in your hair, your eyes with the lashes burnt off, so that it is terrible to look into them, even in memory, which is just another invention. Like spring, that ruthless genius that makes everything thirsty, that tricks us into believing some green shoot clawing through the dirt is the same as a resurrection of the dead. All right, I'll switch gears a little bit. The Slovenian poet Tomas Solomon has a poem called I Have a Horse, and I really like this poem. So I wanted to write it, but I don't have a horse. So this is I Have a Dog. I have a dog. My dog has 2 ears. I have a piano. On my piano, I play badly. I have a daughter. She likes me to sing her to sleep. I have 39 years. I am not more courageous than most. I have insurance. I have it because I have a husband with a real job. Aren't I lucky? I have luck. With luck, I will keep my husband. I have a body. With it, I do the most devastating things that I do. I have poetry. I fear poetry is only a hobby, but it keeps me from watching too much reality TV. I have Lauren from The Bachelor. When Lauren has too much tequila, she says exactly what she thinks. Lauren has some thoughts she should not have. She has a complicated history. For example, she was born in a country built on plunder and rape. I have a mother and father that love me. They love me even though they have divorced. I have rain. I like to watch it lick the bones of spring. I have an iPhone. In the evenings when I'm in bed, I read the news and close my eyes. So a couple years ago, chemists were messing around in a laboratory with a bunch of rare elements, trying to make, I don't know, stuff for science. Should have Googled that too. But they actually accidentally created a new, very vibrant pigment, blue pigment, and everyone was excited because it's really hard to find blue naturally in nature. Like most animals and plants don't actually have blue pigment in them. So this poem came out of reading about this blue pigment. Composition 101. How many ideas fit in a body paragraph? My student asked me. I don't know how to tell her the truth. A lab accident led to the invention of the first blue pigment in 2 centuries. And because this is America, you can buy a tube the size of your pinky for the price of a month's groceries. What I'm getting at is that I'm tired of trying to make my student think I am smart. She has been made to pay every time I check the boxes on the rubric designed to assess how well she can alchemize the clouds of her convictions into words. But I can't even grasp the color blue, which rarely shows up in nature and is usually just a trick of light. The photons will bend through the beads along a jay's feather or scatter off scales just so angled on the blank page of a butterfly's wing. How do we know what we know? Sorry, but the sky is fucking blue, says my student. She's not wrong, but she's also like Florida. Out of nowhere in the summer, she shimmers and suddenly erupts into rain. I wish I could be that saturated with certainty, could see the world as it is, so brilliantly colored in her brain. This next poem has the word monofin in the title, which I found out not a lot of people know the word monofin, but it's like one fin, right? Like a dolphin or a mermaid. So you can buy them on Amazon and swim around in the pool and be a mermaid. So someone has broken the Guinness Book World Record for jumping out of the water wearing a monofin. There are worse things you could do during a pandemic, like sink your retirement into crypto or skim through all the men hoisting up fish on Tinder. I failed at sourdough. How sad is that? Often I couldn't move my fingers in the morning, so certain someone I loved would die hooked up to a ventilator. I committed myself to a yeast I kept in a glass jar on the windowsill. Lo, the wild fruits of the kitchen I fed, spoonfuls of flour and water, day after day after day, until in the small gasps breaking the surface I thought I saw God. Finally, it was just one more thing I was indebted to keeping alive. Even thinking burns oxygen, says the champion swimmer. So what is there but to leap out of a body of water, as if you are a whole animal who does not need a makeshift plastic tail, as if you will live forever in this moment, something like sunlight spilling out of your hands to dissolve into air. Last year I discovered I have a heart arrhythmia, which prompted this poem. Taking apart the radio to find the song. My heart operates imperceptibly faster than it should, which is perfectly normal, the doctor said, under certain circumstances, such as I am a woman with a heart anatomically smaller than most hearts that get measured by machines. And sometimes my racehorse heart jumps the gun, mad for the track that is just now beckoning the feet. Or perhaps I'm a poet who feels and therefore stutters. Once, to prove I had a second heart growing inside me, the technician glided a wand, and out of the empty sky I thought was my belly conjured thunder galloping along some distant shore. My daughter, how does electricity spark the heart to open the doors at the right time and close them? What miracle of salt from the first seed sizzles my blood, now yours? The doctor takes apart the heart molded from plastic, gives me half to hold in my hand. Who keeps the beat, lets some hearts stray? There are navigational errors in the currents of your heart, the doctor said, which is perfectly normal, I said, considering I'm alive thanks to this bloody organ, so perfectly pumping the defective soundtrack of my life. And I'll finish with one more poem called Poem in the Shape of a Window or a Brick. And it's a nice prose poem in the shape of a window or a brick. As a child, I heard the world end when my neighbors smashed glass bottles in the alley, which happened often. To invent out of the open window of a feverish sleeplessness, anthem, dream, or certain bright apocalypse, that's the beauty we are given to bear. Who knows how we visit or are visited, how many hands it takes to build the temple or hammer numbers over every door. Thank you.
Something like sitting in a rocking chair. Anyway, I am delighted to be here. This is like my dream bookstore, the way they used to be, where there are all these, there's tons and tons of books everywhere. And we don't have them anymore in Massachusetts, as far as I've seen, by the way. And thank you, Katie. I love the, I don't know if I can put it into words, but the way you use facts. The way you just incorporate them in and make them into these sort of truths about things. It's really interesting. So this book, Girl is Birch. I'm going to start with the title poem, which sort of helps organize the whole book. And what happened was I moved to New Hampshire. Can you hear me okay? And I don't know why I never noticed birch trees before, but I realized that, of course, in the wind, they can bend over. And then most of the time, they right themselves eventually. And somehow I thought, oh, that's like what it was like to be a girl growing up. That you get, you accommodate to the winds, to the things that happen, and then hopefully you don't stay bent over and break, you come back right. The first reading of this book, I had reread Frost's poem about birches. Do you remember that? In that poem, he rides the birches down. He conquers the birches. It's a riot. I didn't. Anyway. Girl is birch. Pretending. Compliance. Pliant. Ancient lenience. According to a faulty credo, any agile gesture equals allure. Then, when wind abates, stature regained, a realignment, silent-limbed, liminal, resilient as a branch pushed from the path and springing back. So the book moves in a kind of chronological way, and I'm going to kind of chronologically read it. Oak. Does this go down?
Yes.
I feel like I've got this ball in my face. I think I'm a reading princess. Sorry. Perfect. Great. Okay. Oak. In a lullaby crib, beribboned, she lay. Her father, bent at the waist to take her in his palm, raised her light as an azalea, or so he claimed, more or less, without mentioning the azalea. His newly noticed self, her taproot. So that's about my father, and the next poem is called Zeus. And I didn't actually title this Oak until I learned that Zeus's tree was an oak, that according to Google, and that what oaks do apparently is lightning often comes to them, but doesn't destroy them. So this was, and I'm reading a bunch of poems that involve my sister who's sitting in the audience. So she and I don't know if she remembers this, we watched our father in the backyard in Maryland in one of those tropical Maryland storms. And there were these two tree stumps that were cut way up high for some reason that he was standing between. Do you remember? Okay. Zeus. Bow-legged in blue work shorts, between waist-high stumps, massive chest streaked with garden soil and sweat, the world, his broad back the sunset over. Called for bath and bed, she'd waited, hoping he might see and wave. Her sister stopped because she did. The sky swirled black, his hair whipped black, a sudden coursing rain, silver blurred all but his unwaved arm, upraised, as if to greet the lightning. So there's a lot about gardens in this book and the protection of walled gardens and the beauty of them and the isolation of them. This one's called About Gardens. If she'd stayed walled in gardens, blushing poppies, shaded in foxglove, scaled by long-leaved clematis, all that after, before her, she'd have kept a visible shape, reading the summer years. Inside garden walls, she knew early motion, winds that sway, stalks that bend and rise, uncanny and exact. Had she inside found her way by coxcomb phlox and daisies, turquoise skies, her feet in dirt and stood, she'd have known where she'd be home, and known in mounded ground, swaths of luscious green and splash, a repetition of each hue in herself, a young girl, straw-hatted, hoping for the right someday to be where laughter is, voices sharp as green grapes, skin transparent veils. Of course, she couldn't stay in the garden. In dance class. We took we were sent to modern dance class at Ethel Butler's modern dance class studio. And I think the rest of it you'll get in dance class. But what's not in this poem is the big poodle named George, who was always lying in the corner. At the downbeat, prepare to twirl. Ethel drums, rapid to crescendo. Modern Ethel Butler's platform breasts form a ledge. To stop our slumping chests, we must imagine raised trays. Mine carries dewy aluminum tumblers in rainbow hues. But we are too young to boast such alpine protuberances for amber beads to sway between. We try slanting our upper bodies back, raising our arabesques, drummed by the handheld tambourine to twirl, 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 as if not dizzy, to see, not veering from that vision of the naked dancer in the undress room, penis a golden blur, my starfished hands balance points against a fall. Hemmed in. I knew my uncle and his wife slept separately. Each ate a single boiled egg, scraped dry with silver cutlery their toast. I prayed my Gentile aunt would guide me through her Mary Frances sewing book. Do you have the Mary Frances sewing books here? They're totally wonderful. My aunt did give me the Mary, sorry to interrupt, but I just want to tell you about this. It had patterns for dolls' dresses, and it was, do you know it? Oh, it's so neat. And it had these characters, all the sewing things were characters, like the pencils and the scissors and everything. Anyway, guide me through her Mary Frances sewing book where scissor shears in shiny legs did not snip by accident, where pencils lead drew garden frocks, a wedding dress for dolls, patterns included. I wore blue cardigans and pleated skirts. The new elastic garter belt retracted every step. Yet my flesh first budding bloomed. Her Sunday school Jesus spread chaste hands over lamb-flocked fields where Paris sheep with lowered heads ate not the radiant grass. I don't know if you're intimidated by all these things. If I were sitting where you are and I saw she's going to read all those poems, I'm going to stay away. But they're short. I'll keep zooming along.
That's exciting. Like, she gets to read all those poems.
I have a feeling that most women, and probably men too, have had the experience of the shame of the body. This is called way too bold. My turquoise swimsuit exposed white thighs, spoke shame before I spoke at 9. I bet I'll swim the whole lake, it's a mile. My father took the bet, $1.50, said he'd row by me. With worn out oars he creaked. My own arms cleaved the green as silently as fish. Halfway across Lake George, I plunged under in full stroke, out of sight at last, unmeasured triumph. The weird thing about that poem is I read it to my, and my 5.5-year-old grandson was in the audience, and about 2 weeks later, he got on the phone and he said, "What happened to her? Did she ever come up?" Now we're a little older, maidenhood. Inside, dripping sap, I knew, sure as Daphne, they were in pursuit. I knew I'd need to hoard what I held. I thought the danger was in weakened grape skins, rot. So I'd romp the terraced vineyards of flirtation, always noting a route out. Practice rapid maneuverings through situations, innuendos. Never where they thought I'd be, but elsewhere. Never, until now, lost the art of imminent departure. I keep wanting to ask if you recognize that feeling. Do you know what means?
Plural. Zorro.
Good. Bingo. Zorro. That's the title. Which is hard to spell. 3 slashes of sound. The Z-tip flexi sword whipped, makeshift black half mask, his body hidden, hands in gauntlets. But Zorro's mouth, barred, succulent, lured us. His cape hitched silky at his smooth throat, too white skin, the black stallion imagined, rearing, pretending not to feel his hips, riding our bodies. It was great to get old enough that I could write this. We went to a summer camp in West Virginia, and one year there was this enormous rainstorm, and the Cacapon River flooded. I don't know if you've ever swum in a flooded river, but all the mud gets in there. The poem starts way earlier, but it ends in that situation. So, in retrospect, once still as July lilies, black cove waters, I hovered in heat with dragonflies, limbs limber, wavy eelgrass hair, an avatar of me as nymph. Then dove into the swollen, red, clay-clogged river and blinded, stared at nothing but water's dark moil. When I surfaced, face to face with a flood-swept, swimming cottonmouth. No toward, no after, eyes clear. So I didn't even intend for there to be snakes in here, but there are some more. This one is called After a Savory Breakfast, That Fasting Day for Krishna. So you heard I was in India, and we were eating in the student mess hall. And one day, we're eating breakfast, and one of the students said, "This is what we eat when we fast." And I thought, what? Which was sort of my experience the whole time, like, what? The pieces don't fit. After a savory breakfast, that fasting day for Krishna, I watched a woman in fuchsia crouch, rinsing rice she swirled in a metal bowl. As close as she could come that day to satisfaction. Decorative mirrors made her sari, bright, reflecting my gaze from tens of tiny knees. I saw, only when I squatted to take its photo, a butterfly in my path, new hatched, drying its wings, already beautiful at birth, black with white circles like eyes on top, yellow and orange under. Also, a blackbird, the kind that flies in half scallops like an abridged finch, stopped, lift its tail, revealing a red tuft. The dull green neem leaves, teased with new white blossoms, bursting from miniature yellow trumpets, I reached to touch, stopping when I saw dangling from a limb a gray cobra daring me. Really. I held my breath. He held me. We did not glide, but streamed like underwater weeds, propeller netted and dragged through the roiling wake. It made smug sense to me. Sure, I deserved the brimming river. Of course, I didn't. The first month after I leave, already, I hardly remember him, only the blue. All those years, I pumped my own steady wings and flew only to the overhanging eaves. All those slanted dawns, I woke to a mirror, my eyes shut. Now, I dream in the dark, wide-eyed to every wind that carries me. I think I skipped something that I really wanted to read. I did. Hang on. Girl in the mirror. You know about mirrors mirrors in girls. And I gather mirrors in boys too, but I didn't know that. Is it true? Anyway, I and I think a lot of women are preoccupied by avoiding or seeking mirrors. Is that true? Nobody's admitting it. Okay. This has 3 sections. 1, girl in the mirror. 1, did I finally, for an instant, leave it? Leave it? 2, had I always been placed to please, shoulders tight, my hands in every photo held carefully, one nestled as a teacup in the other? Neck upright, a stalk. No, a swan, head turned ever so vaguely away, never direct nor uncalculated for effect. Left arm lowered to left, right asymmetrical. My gestures adjusting to repeat, reflect, repeat, deflect in mirrors. Gazing, rather snitching glances in bistros, car windows, ponds, spoons, glazed by daily artifice. Always stylish, a mannequin in cantilevered cowboy boots stitched with butterflies, long skirt, shoulder padded jacket, wide belt, hair angled. See me, please see me. Eyes on me, all eyes, especially my own imagining eyes, imagining. 3, until that sighting, unplanned in dark glass at the train station, hair untamed, uncontainable me, too shiny and black raincoat, untended in drizzle, the frizzy spikes of hair jagged, my too black raincoat with its inside reversible flutter of flowerets in green and purple, too sugary, worse even than the unremitting shadow, myself, projected that anyone might see, lonely. Look, we're down to the last 3. Nudged. Do you know what a mullein is? That plant? We seem to have them spontaneously growing. They're apparently good for eyes, but they grow this tall yellow stalk that, anyway, that's what they look like. Nudged. Since I'm breathing today, why not notice how absorbing the stamina of mullein, pulsing, salubrious, yellow, upright. And in spite of not witnessing on purpose, I am witness to quivering diversity. No space not clovers or wild winking, like reminding, with its disinterest, which forgotten seems not forgetting but revealing after all. Again, I am breathing, a tumbled spore of earth and siphoned starlight commingling. Purity. The lessons abound, like meadow deer in fall, following the last, each lingering to munch and leaping toward what comes next. To be breathed alive, engendered, all Genesis, pledged to breathe, comes to us, through us, in fabulous array, for us to tend every single reed, bending, green or dry, and to respond, bowing. A purity, though dark, plain, attends us. And the last one is called floaters. You know about floaters that happen in people's eyes? I did have my eye doctor come to a reading, which was great. Floaters, I see them, said the oculist, pirouetting glass earrings, the dots, garden variety. We're born with something clear, translucent, of course, so you can see, she said. A relic, useless now, begins to crinkle, creases show as floaters. Though, owing to gravity, they sink. Unless you stand on your head, she grinned. But really, it's their shadow we observe in passing. Thank you.
we have any questions for our poets this evening?
Or any answers.
Michael, would you mind rereading the poem about the fast of Krishna?
No, I wouldn't. And that's a hard one to hear. I mean, to follow. Or to write. After a savory breakfast at fasting day for Krishna, it's sort of a collage poem. Things are layered on top of each other. I watched a woman in fuchsia crouch. Rinsing rice, she swirled in a metal bowl, as close as she could come that day to satisfaction. Decorative mirrors made her sari bright, reflecting my gaze from tens of tiny me's. I keep wanting to stop and explain to you what it looked like.
Oh, I love that line.
I saw, only when I squatted to take its photo, a butterfly on my path, new hatched, drying its wings, already beautiful at birth, black with white circles, like eyes on top, orange and yellow underneath. I'm sorry, I really want to make editorial comment. I mean, it was so surprising to see this black and white butterfly and then to discover it was entirely colorful on the bottom. Like, why? It's so beautiful. Also a blackbird, the kind that flies in half scallops like an abridged finch, stop, lift its long tail, revealing a red tuft. The dull green neem leaves, teased with new white blossoms, bursting from miniature yellow trumpets. I reached to touch, stopping when I saw dangling from a limb a gray cobra daring me. Anything you want to just ask about that or say about that?
Well, I just was really taken with the line, the 10 tiny me's.
Right. There is I don't know the name of the style of sari that has all those mirrors sewn into them.
We had when we were recording, I bought in a handbag that had little mirrors embroidered.
Yeah.
You really have a pair of cowboy boots with butterflies on them?
I did. They were great. I couldn't exactly walk because they had those slanty heels, but I felt so great standing.
Katie, I have a question for you about how the poems develop in your mind. When I kind of like look at it's kind of like this interesting juxtaposition of the way you're experiencing your poetry, whereas yours are so thought-based and yours are so like feeling-based, like all your senses. And so, but I tend more towards that. So I'm so curious about how the thoughts become the poetry, and how it's just like there's almost like this logical rumination, and how does it become and it was just a very powerful, like there was so much power in it. When you stood up, I thought she's this tiny little Midwestern girl, and then there was such power in the words, and so I'm just wondering how you get them from here to there.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if they feel logical to me, so I often start with a fact I see on the internet or something I hear on the radio, or actually, maybe I didn't read so many tonight, but a lot of my poem titles are other people's poem titles, because I don't usually start with an experience of my own, and then I guess I don't think of them as logical because usually I'm a little confused with my own poems, and I have been known to even, like, I'll write a poem and I'm like, I don't think that makes sense, so I'll actually try and annotate my own poem to see if there's a logic, which there may be. Well, I don't know.
That's a fantastic journey.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
I mean, lots of poets have said if you're setting out to write a poem about a certain subject, you've already failed, right? So I hope that my poems just come out of the unknown, or I admire the Surrealists for trying to activate the unconscious and see where it takes you, or as Robert Bly would talk about, leaping poetry. So you don't know where you're going. And I think that's why I was drawn to Jericho Brown's duplex form, where you kind of make a leap between each stanza, but there's a little thread maybe hanging on from stanza to stanza. So yeah,
I really appreciate that you started with maybe somebody else's title, and then created something of your own. I often think, like, I don't have this original thought, validating in a selfish way.
I highly recommend it if you're stuck, because I used to be at, like, take walks and stuff, but then I had kids and I couldn't leave the house, so you just get somebody else's book, look through the table of contents, find a cool title, and then just steal it. Start from there.
Yeah, thank you.
Anything else? Looks like
All
not.
right. Well, thank you very much, everybody.